So hi, welcome everyone. We're very excited for today's AMA because I think it's a theme that will be extremely practical for a lot of our startups, especially coming from IoT. Whenever we're dealing with hardware, things come up, and certainly CE certifications and FCC is something that all of you who's dealing with hardware will have to achieve at some point. We're very fortunate to have with us today Raul Gonzalez from AT4 Wireless Solutions here in Spain, but you are an international company as far as I'm aware, yes?
Yes, it is. We have branches in USA. We have branches in USA, Taiwan, Japan, and now we belong to DECA group, which is a bigger group, Germany. It's an European group with labs across the world. Okay?
Just to give a quick background on Raul. So Raul has a Master's in Science of Telecommunication Engineering. He has an executive MBA, and you previously, in a previous life, you worked as a project manager and engineer, and now currently you are for AT4 Wireless, who helps companies, big, small, deal with the headache that is acquiring certification. So I'm going to now leave it to you, Raul, to do a short intro of about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll get stuck into the questions.
Okay,
over to you.
Perfect. Let me share a presentation. Okay, this one. Okay, here we go. We are going to do, as Brendan says, a quick look to the requirements for CE and FCC, and then we will go for question. Okay, so the first question when a company places a product in the markets that they can must take into account is the regulatory requirements, because it's something that it's mandatory for marketing the device across the world. If you have a look to the map, there are more than 200 regulatory agencies across the world, basically one per country. The two most important and most well-known are European market and USA and Canada, FCC and IC. But other markets, like if you want to launch a product across the world, you need to take into account other markets, like for instance Japan, China, Taiwan, Brazil, Mexico, or whatever. Having said that, the two most important agencies is Europe and FCC, we must say also that many countries accept the test reports from Europe or from FCC, from USA and Canada. For instance, in Israel, you can get the approval using the test reports with the same standard as in Europe. It does not mean that you can go directly to Israel or to, for instance, also Australia, report and place the product in the market. You need to do, typically in each country, you need to do what we call an homologation process. It means that you have to go, for instance, in Australia to ACMA, which is a certification body there, and present these test reports with additional technical documentation from the device and get the certificate to approve the device in Australia. It means that the cost to go to Australia is lower because you have already the test reports from Europe. It's different if you go, for instance, to Japan, where you have to do testing in Japan plus all the procedure, okay? For this reason, we are going to focus in this session in European and American requirements for FCC IC, because having these two certifications, it's easier to reach many other regions in the world, okay? Starting with CE, in Europe, it's the legal frameworks gives all the responsibility to the manufacturer. And the European Commission, what they do is just to publish what they call directives for CE mark. A product must be compliant with the applicable directive. And once that the vendors make the testing and perform all the verification according to these directive requirements, they can place the CE mark logo. There are many directives in Europe, starting from medical devices, construction materials, chemical materials, and we are going to focus obviously in directives related with electrical and electronic devices. Important directives are EMC, the electromagnetic compatibility, and low voltage directive for electrical devices without any radio. a radio interface, something like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or 2G, 3G, LTE radio, it must go under the Radio and Telecommunication Directive, RTT. This was the old directive, and the newer one now has been published recently, is the Radio Equipment Directive. Both are quite similar, and both are in force at this moment. RTT directive is in grace period until 2017, and Radio Directive is starting right now. In terms of requirements, both are similar, okay? What is more important is that, what I say at the beginning, is that the vendor is who has the responsibility to ensure that the device is according to European standard. There is not a high-level body that will review the test reports or will review the device documentation. It's the vendor who signs the declaration of conformity and place the product in the market who must take this responsibility. Focusing in the radio directive, it's if you are mainly IoT companies, which for sure will have some radio, Bluetooth or Zigbee or Wi-Fi or whatever, it should be the applicable directive for this kind of products, okay? The directive gives at high level the requirements that a device must fulfill. But this directive does not specify how to comply with that. They say, for instance, that device must be safety according to electrical safety, acoustic shock. It must not, the radio frequency exposure for persons cannot cause any damage, or it must be compliant with EMC in terms that it does not generate disturbance to other devices over some limits, or it might be ready to accept some disturbance for other devices, okay? And in terms of radio frequency, it uses the spectrum correctly. It's transmit in the band that is assigned to the device. For instance, a Bluetooth device transmits in 2.4 gigahertz band, and emissions out of these bands, it's below the maximum limits, okay? And what the European Commission requests to vendors or manufacturers that place a product in Europe is to buy compliance with this directive, okay? But directive, as I say, give the high-level requirement, how to be compliant. European directive, European Commission publishes periodically what they call the list of harmonized standards. These harmonized standards are typically European standards generated by the European Telecommunication Institute. If you fulfill this standard, it gives you automatically presumption of conformity with the directive essential requirements. Basically, and summarizing, you need to meet the applicable standard according to the directive, okay? For a typical product, in the radio product, you need to test EMC, need to test radio frequency to verify that the modulation powers and bands used, it's okay. Need to test electrical safety to verify that the product is not dangerous for person. And depending on the use of the product, you need to test SAR or not. SAR testing, what we measure is that the radiation when the product is close to the body, for instance, a cell phone that I can bring in my pocket, or I can have in my hand close to my hair, does not cause any risk for the user, okay? Once that I have performed all the testing, the vendor has two ways to demonstrate that it is in compliance with the applicable directive. According to the RTT directive, option number one is the Annex 3, is the declaration of conformity. In this route, what the manufacturer does is to pick up the samples, go to the lab, perform the testing. The lab gives to the manufacturer a test report showing that the test is in compliance with the applicable standards from the harmonized list. Or compile this test report plus additional documentation about the device, something like bill of materials, schematics, PCB layouts, pictures, and so on. Compile all of this information and store in company records, and sign a declaration of conformity. It's basically a piece of sheet, stating that the device is in compliance with applicable directive, meets the essential requirements, and the company more responsible signing the document is the company who is placing the product in the market. And this declaration of conformity must be included in the device user manual. Having all of this process completed, the vendor can place the CE logo in the device to show that the device is in compliance with the European requirements. And company stores this technical construction file, company report, in case that there is a market surveillance, because the European Commission, each country performs periodically market surveillance in the picking up devices from the market and testing in their internal labs. And if they see that the device is not in compliance with the requirements, they will contact the company and will request this technical construction file to demonstrate what has done the company to verify that the device is in compliance with the European requirements. Okay. The second option to demonstrate compliance is the Annex 4, and it is the notified body expert opinion. The procedure is similar to the other one, plus there is a third neutral party expert. In this case, it's a notified body. Here, for instance, in AT4 wireless, we have one notified body who, as a neutral third party, an expert, evaluates all the test report and technical documentation, and makes some kind of what they call expert opinion. It's a signal letter declaring that the device is according to all applicable standards for the directive. This notified body expert opinion, plus the declaration of conformity, in both cases, the declaration of conformity must be signed by the company which is placing the product in the market. Okay. In this case, what the company has is the notified body expert opinion that gives some kind of additional verification and quality level. Okay. And the company can place the product in the market showing the CE logo plus the number of the notified body as a third party who has verified that it meets all the requirements. Okay. Moving to FCC, here the framework is a little bit different. All the regulations for radio product in FCC is specified in Code of Federal Regulation number 47. This code is divided in different parts. Some parts are focused in compliance procedures. It defines the routes that a vendor has to show them devices in compliance and certify the device to sell in USA, and other regulation shows the technical requirements. Here, the technical requirements are similar than in Europe. There are technical requirements with regard to EMC, radio frequency, and with regard to SAR, to absorption rate, RF exposure. Okay. In this case, the difference is that Code of Federal Regulation 47 does not include any requirement about safety, and it is because safety in USA market is handled by private certificate marks like UL, ETL, MAT, and it applies only to devices that will be connected to the public power supply. For instance, I have a Bluetooth low energy sensor, which works with coin cell batteries. Electrical safety does not apply. Okay, but if I have a wireless set-top box for home applications, and this wireless set-top box has an external AC/DC power adapter, the safety requirement applies to the AC/DC external power adapter. Okay, it's not necessary for the radio product itself. With regard to the approval routes in FCC, there are three different. The first one is verification, and it applies for devices which does not have any radio interface. It is for EMC approval. And the declaration of conformity is similar to verifications. It applies to similar devices. There are some difference if it is a computer device, if it is a peripheral device, but essentially it's quite similar, both procedures, and both are for devices without radio. And the third one is the certification procedure. It's what we call TCB. It applies to devices with radio, And it means that, for instance, a vendor with a Bluetooth low energy device must go to a TCB as a third party to certify the product. It's something similar like notified body in Europe, but the major difference is that in USA, vendors, it's mandatory for vendors to go to TCB. The TCB is who has the right to issue the grant to get the certification in FCC. You cannot do a declaration of conformity for a radio product in FCC like we do in Europe, okay? You need to go to FCC, to TCB, sorry. The TCB will review the test report, the schematics, and so on, and if everything is correctly done, they will issue the certificate or will assign you an FCC ID, which is the number that demonstrates that the device has passed the certification. The procedure is similar in Europe, with the difference that I say before, that the evaluation on the TCB is mandatory. And once that this evaluation is okay and passed, the vendor get the certificate, is listed in FCC database, and the device can be imported in USA. If you ship devices to USA and it is not listed in FCC database, custom will reject the devices because they are not in compliance with US regulations. Okay, this is a high-level view of European and American requirements. I'm going to go now quickly to show an example for a typical situation that many small companies face when they start developing the first product. Is what should I do? Start the developing from zero using, for instance, a Bluetooth low energy chipset, or should I use a certified module? It's a module is for a vendor who has already passed all the certification, and I can get the advantage of this certification in order to reduce cost, okay? So this is a virtual example. I'm thinking in a company that wants to develop a sensor based in Bluetooth low energy. This sensor is going to be something like a heart rate monitor or something like that. And they in Europe and US and North American markets, okay? So they make a question. The typical question is start from the scratch with a Bluetooth low energy chipset, or start using an approved module. It has pros and cons. For instance, the designing cost and effort should be lower with the module, because basically it's just to place the module and make the rest of the electronic design. You have not to take care about radio frequency design. It is also cheaper because you can leverage part of the certification from the module, but the price per unit is higher. If I'm going to have a small production, probably for a first version of the device, a module is a good idea. If I plan to sell thousands of products, probably the cost of the module is considerable in the final cost per unit. So maybe probably it's better to go to a chipset, okay? So it's a matter of decision between complexity and cost and design time. With a proven module, I will design the device quickly, and with the time to market should be lower. Suppose that I want to use a module, at least to start the first version of my device. I need to take into account some requirements, especially in terms of certification, because if I use a chipset, I have to perform all the certification. Meanwhile, if I use a module, part of the certification can be leveraged, and in FCC even I can avoid to go to the TCB if I meet some rules that are required by modules, and we will see it now. Okay. If I use a chipset, just to give you an idea in terms of cost for a Bluetooth low energy, total cost for certification will be around 8,000 for Europe, and for FCC around 6,000. In the opposite part, if I use an approved module, I avoid to perform RF testing, and in FCC, it's likely that I avoid also to go to TCB. So the cost, the overall cost is reduced considerably. We were talking before about more than 10,000, and now we are talking about around 5,000–6,000. Okay. What are the key points that I need to take into account? In Europe, it's just to select an antenna. with a smaller gain, okay? Or if I use the same antenna, I can fully iterate the RF test results. If I use an antenna with a smaller gain, it's recommended to perform partial tests, at least the radio frequency radiated test. For the RF exposure conditions for a Bluetooth low energy, because it's low power with mathematical calculation is enough, and I avoid to spend money in sub testing. And for the notified body, if I want to do the notified body, I will only need to get the test reports from the module vendor, because the notified body needs to have all the information to make the assessment. For USA, the requirements are similar, but typically FCC, because if they have the certification process, has more strict rules. In Europe, at the end of the day, the responsibility of testing and making sure that the device complies with all the requirements remains in the vendor. In FCC, they have clear rules, and for instance, for Bluetooth devices, for non-licensed transmitter, they request that the antenna that you use in the integration has a lower gain, and they must be the same type of antenna. Okay, in order to be able to inherit all the RF testing from the module and save cost. And with regard to the RF exposure, when you certify the device in FCC, it is for some specific use conditions. If the module has been certified for what they call mobile exposure condition, is when the user will be more than 20 centimeters far away from the radio, or if the device has been certified for portable condition, it's when the user will be to less than 20 centimeters from the antenna. In this case, if it is going to be a wearable device, it will be located to less than 20. So it's interesting for me to select a module that has been already evaluated in portable conditions. And I will avoid to do any additional procedure with TCB. Okay, if I have, for instance, this is to an example, I can have a module which has been the module A has been evaluated in mobile exposure conditions. And now when I place in a wearable device close to the body, I will need to modify the certification of the module to be able to use it. It does not mean that it's not possible. It means that you need to do additional procedure with the FCC, and it will have an additional cost. For instance, module B has been already evaluated in portable conditions, so I can use it less than 20 centimeters from the radio, having the user less than 20 centimeters, and I can go directly and inherit completely the module certification. Okay, thank you very much. And now, Brendan, should go to the questions.
Yeah, great, Raul. That was extremely interesting, certainly for me, and I think it will really help some of the guys I can see in the channel here. Especially when you're talking about the health, because I know we have Javier Ramos and Jose Antonio from Fletcher who are doing devices on the skin, and we have another few companies like that. Mm-hmm. While they're getting ready, so please start asking the questions now, everyone who's on the chat. I'll read them out as they come. But while we're doing that, just to clarify, so when you're saying, when we're talking about building using pre-approved modules and chipsets that aren't approved, mm-hmm. Can we avoid completely the FCC certification, or do we still have to go through that process, even if our product is completely built from the modules? The fact that we put it together individually means we still have to go through the FCC, and it's just easier. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. As I say, quickly in the presentation, there are 3 approval groups in FCC: verification and declaration of conformity, as for what they call unintentional radiation. Unintentional radiator is any electronic device that may have some noise in the space, okay? Because any electronic device by its nature makes interference, okay? And the third procedure is certification, which is for intentional radiator. Is an intentional radio, a Bluetooth low energy transmitter, a Wi-Fi transmitter, or a cellular transmitter, okay? And device must be compliant for unintentional and intentional, because, for instance, a cell phone will have a part that is radio, but another part of the cell or the device, it's unintentional, is the PCB with electronic, which is it's EMC, okay, requirement. If you use an approved module and you meet the requirements of this module, because the module you must use an antenna, a specific antenna type, or an antenna with a gain less than value specified by the vendor because it's related with the module certification. The radio part, you can directly use the module certification. You don't have to do anything with TCB. However, you have still the unintentional radiation part for the EMC. In that case, what you have to do is a verification or declaration of conformity process to cover the EMC for the rest of the device, because this module will be placed in a PCB, and the PCB will have sensors or will have any batteries and charging battery circuit or whatever, okay? So it's more or less clear. You have to, what I want to say is you have two blocks, radio from one side, EMC from the other side. If you use the module and meet the conditions, radio part is inherited, but you always have EMC part. And in this EMC part, you will have to do verification or declaration of conformity, depending on the kind of the device, okay?
Okay, so we've got plenty of questions here, and I'm going to jump around to the ones that make the most sense in order. And the first one I see there that I want to ask you is from Larry from MyOctopus. And he's asking, at what point of the development would you recommend to start the certification process? Given the ongoing development, is there a golden rule as to at which point of the development the changes will not be too difficult for recertifying a product? Yeah. It's a long question. So what he's asking in summary is, at what point when you're developing do you need to start thinking about certification and applying for it? And is there a point too far that it becomes a problem to actually certify again?
Yeah, it's a typical matter when to start. With this presentation, basically showing the case with module versus chipset. This shall be the first question that a company must do, okay? When they do the design, okay? Should I go and start from zero with a chipset, or should I go and use an approved module? It will depend for sure in the results that they have, the business case they have. If they are going to have they plan to have a mass production, probably it's better to go to a chipset. If they are going to start with a first market test with small production, probably it's easier to go to a module. This is a design decision. Once that you start the design, typically what we recommend to companies is to do some pre-test during design. Okay, once that you have a prototype, go to the lab. You do not need to run completely the standard. You don't need to test to spend twice the money, but at least go to the lab and test some radiated spurious emissions. It's 3-4 hours testing that you can do, and make some verification, especially in safety part, because companies, it's a fact that many companies that do not take care about the requirements, and when they come to the lab, for instance, with a PCB design, they go to safety testing and safety requirements for telecommunication device. You might have up to two. One test, for instance, is abnormal use, and I can have a failure in the power supply, and I can have a shortcut or whatever. And companies does not take into account these kind of failures. And when there is a shortcut, a small shortcut in the circuit, there is no other protection, and the device burns. This is not allowed, okay? It can be easily avoided with a design review and some pretest in the safety lab also. We used to do this a lot with customers. In the meeting, during the development, when they have first prototypes, go to the lab, make small pretest, or I don't know, it depends on at the end of the day, it's a compromise between cost, but with 1,000, 2,000 euros, you can do a pretest and can give you a good confidence to go to the lab, okay? And when you go to the lab, the major advantage right now is that radio products, 90% are firmware. So if you are failing, probably you might have fixes to do that by reducing the power, by changing the output power values by firmware, okay? And reduce the emissions. You might have a very, very bad RF design if you are going to have a lot of spurious emissions that you are going to need a hardware redesign, okay?
Excellent, thank you. As you say, it is something you do need to consider from the very beginning, and
yeah, at the beginning, consider to go for approved module or to go for a chip. If you go for a approved module, make sure you are going to meet the integration conditions, okay? Because we see with many companies now with the IoT, we see many companies that has product that they are not radio product, but now everything is connected. For instance, a vending machine. A company goes, okay, I want to modify my vending machine to place a 2G, 3G LTE module so I can see the status of the machine with my system. And they use the module, but they do not take into account. Then they do not take into account the limitation for antenna gain. They do not take into account the limitation for other radios located inside the product or whatever. And when they go for certification, say, okay, you can certify this device, and you are going to spend a lot of money because you are not fulfilling the conditions for the module. And it's the same like you were doing completely the device. If you will take into account these conditions at the beginning of your design, select the correct antenna, you will avoid this problem, for instance, okay?
Excellent. I'm going to stick with the general questions for the moment, and then I'm going to get into, there's a very specific question here that I don't really understand, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But sticking with the generals for the moment, it's a question I had. When you develop your next version of the product, when you're moving on to your second version of your hardware, and you've only changed one module, do you have to recertify both CE and FCC again?
It depends on the change that you are doing. There are, as I told you at the beginning, FCC has very clear rules. If you are modifying, you are not modifying the radio, you are only modifying the PCB or are modifying the housing, probably partial test is a no. Okay, they have the rules defined, and you go to the TCB, and the TCB will accept or will say, no, this is not enough testing, you need to do more. In Europe, this responsibility remains on the vendor, okay? So it depends on what vendor considers is necessary or not. We as a lab typically provide some recommendations. For instance, if you are modifying the PCB and the housing, we recommend you to do partial testing for EMC and to do some radiated spurious emissions to make sure that the device is still in compliance, okay? If you want to be 100% sure and everything okay, retest fully, but it's something that you need to get a compromise, okay?
So in Europe, it's a level of risk. It's up to you to assess the risk.
Yeah, it is. But basically, depending on the kind of modification, but basically, if it is some housing modification, because I'm going to do a new version with a small box, or I'm going to review my board, but the radio part is the same. Basically, some EMC testing and some partial radio frequency testing to test the spurious emission is the typical. But it depends case by case, okay? Because you say, okay, I was using I was using one cellular module for, I don't know, let's say Telit module, and I'm going to move to another vendor to Sierra Wireless module. This is totally different radio, so you will have to test again. If you are modifying some traces in the PCB, probably a small EMC partial testing is enough.
So that actually was one of the questions I was going to follow on with, is every time you change supplier, you do have to recertify. Is that correct?
If you change the supplier of your module, if you change the supplier of a component and the company has the same features, you do not need to do that.
Okay, so if it's exactly the same certification.
Yeah, the critical, in this kind of product, the critical part is the radio part, okay? If you are using the Bluetooth Low Energy chipset, low energy chipset, and you change to another vendor, it's like you were changing your radio completely. Okay? If you are changing to the same chipset from vendor, but vendor says, no, this is a newer version, and it is totally compliant with the other one, and it's pin compatible, and you do not need to do, there is no change in power amplifiers and so on. Small spot check is enough.
Okay. And just one last general question is, a lot of our startups are sourcing already prototypes and early production from cheaper places that are cheaper than Europe to produce, such as China, Taiwan, Malaysia. What advice would you have for our startups when approaching these companies? Is it cheaper to get it certified over there? Or are you better off making sure that you always certify in Europe?
It is,
or America?
Yeah, no, I must be honest, we also have labs in Taiwan, okay? And it's the market. And testing prices in Asia are cheaper than in Europe. Not so big like in the past, okay? In the past, there was a bigger difference, but right now, not too big. But even so, it's cheaper. And they have totally competent labs there. It's not something that you cannot trust. You only has to take into account one thing, and it's what I explained at the beginning. In Europe, the responsibility of the product is from the company who is placing the product in the market. Some cases the vendor, some cases the importer, because they are who sign the declaration of conformity. The declaration of conformity is a legal document where the company declares that the device is according to European standards. If you get the product certified from Chinese company and they give you a test report that says that it's passed from a lab, okay, that is a test report. But questions number one is, do they test everything that is applicable to this device? Or you get a test report with a pass rating, okay? But do they apply all the conditions? Do they perform the testing correctly? The second one is this really a test report from this device, or it is a piece of paper with a signature? And you are trusting these documents. It is up to you as a company. What we recommend to companies, it's just to keep here the quality control. Okay, you can use the Asia labs. I'm not going to claim anything about them, but at least make sure that everything is okay. And how you can make sure? Okay, if you test here and you have the lab here, you will be close to it. If not, at least to perform some partial testing here to see that the testing results are aligned with the result you have received from your supplier, or at least to pick up these reports and go to a notified body. The notified body will review the reports and with the expert opinion will say, okay, according to this report, this device meets all the standards. For sure, the notified body does not know if the test lab is copy and paste the rest report from another device, or they use another device for testing. They trust what it is in the papers, okay? But at least you have a review and you have the idea that everything that is applicable has been tested and has been tested correctly. That is up to the company. It's a matter of sorting. We recommend companies to try to keep the quality control here, okay? But it's something that some companies has a very, very fine budget and they need to look for alternative, which is really a normal case. At least to make sure that you are importing something, you are getting something according to what you have paid, okay? And never forget that the civil responsibility is from the company that signs the declaration of conformity. Okay. For FCC, at this moment, you need to do the certification in FCC, and you can use the test report from a Chinese lab, no problem. But they are in transition period right now until 2017, where they will not accept no longer test reports from labs who do not have signed what they have the mutual recognition agreement. It's an agreement to recognize labs vice versa. And for instance, China does not have this agreement with USA. So in June 2017, if there is nothing changed in that period, because it should start this year, and they delay in 1 year more, Chinese lab test report will not be acceptable for FCC certification.
Excellent. So as you say, it's with FCC is a different case, but for Europe, for the CE mark, it certainly is, like all business, a level of trust and if you're not 100% sure, you should at least do some partial testing here in Europe.
Some percent. We do a lot with manufacturers, with Spanish manufacturers, even with a small Spanish importers that they import Christmas lighting or power adapters. Even they put them. They do not manufacture it. They directly import from China, get the Christmas lighting, and they say, okay, let's do some tests. They gave me their certificates, but let's do some tests. Because as I told you, the European governments make market surveillance. They go to the shopping mall, pick up the devices from the shelf, and send to labs for testing. And if this device does not pass, for instance, a Christmas lighting must be turned off during 10 hours, and temperature cannot go over, I don't know, 70 degrees. Okay, it's something that I'm telling from my mind. I don't know the requirement. No, it's just to show one example. And if the device does not fulfill this requirement, the first thing that is going to do in this case the Spanish ministry or the Spanish industry ministry or any European government is contact to the company who signed the declaration of conformity and say, hey, show me the technical construction file, show me the test reports. And if there is some small incident, okay, they will ask you to fix and continue selling. But if it is something more risky that might imply the safety of the user, they might oblige you to recall the product from the market and face a penalty.
Excellent. No, I think that's a comprehensive answer for people to now go home and think about. Moving on to some of the specific questions that we have. I have one here from Colin from Standard Access. And his question is, for an electronic device that has a transmitter, such as a radio frequency key fob, in the case Standard Access, the company, can we simply test this for CE and EMC and FCC for USA? In EU, our device falls under the EN6950, Information Technology Equipment. Does it also fall under Radio Equipment Directive and thus may require part of the LVD for the USA? It's a lot of words for me, so please ask me to clarify.
I more or less understood. The key fobs.
So I'll just repeat it again. For electronic device that has a transmitter, such as an RF key fob, can we simply test this for CE and EMC and FCC? That's one question. And the second question is, in the EU, our device falls under the EN6950, Information Technology Equipment. Does it also fall under the Radio Equipment Directive and thus require part of the LVD for the USA? That's the two questions there.
Yeah, let's go first with the first one. The key fobs, it depends on the technology they use, okay, for USA. For Europe, if it's using a passive tag to identify the key fob, let's say the car is doing the active part, reading the code of the key, but the key is not an active transmitter, it requests to be tested for electrical safety, EMC, and for radio frequency jointly with the reader. Okay, there is a small test to be done with the reader. In terms of FCC, it is considered a passive receiver, and passive receiver in FCC are not subject to radio approval. It is subject only to EMC approval. And what you have to perform is the EMC test of the device working with the reader. Okay? Is it clear, more or less?
I hope it is. I hope, Colin, you have your answer. If not, please put it in the chat and I'll ask again. And the second,
if not, feel free to give my contact details to the
to Colin. And secondly was their device falls under Information Technology Equipment in the EU. Do you think it also falls under Radio Equipment Directive in the US and requiring then the LVD?
No, not in the US, assuming that it is the typical key fob that is passive.
Okay. So
there are some key fobs, especially the new cars that can, when they lose the battery, they can transmit a security code to the car to open the door. And in this case, it acts as a special transmitter. And in this case, it will be subject to radio. Okay, but it's not very usual case. Okay.
Okay, that was the one that scared me the most. The another question that I saw here was, when a company already has a standard CE mark and they'll be getting their CE class 2A soon, and they want to now export to North America, what should they do first? What's the next step for them to do?
For a radio product?
I'll just clarify. They're talking about medical device.
Medical devices, I have focused here only in telecommunication because it is the most simple case. Medical device also here in Europe, there are specific directives for medical devices, okay? The procedure is similar. You have to test. In case of medical device, it is mandatory to go to a notified body. It's not like an option because the European Commission considers that these devices, the risks for the user are bigger and they do not really relay the responsibility on the manufacturer. They want to have this review. Anyway, you are compliant with European standards. And it does not mean that you are going to be compliant with US standards. You have to start a procedure again in US. If it is an electronic device without any radio, you need to do the EMC testing and go to the verification or declaration of conformity. If the device is a radio product, you need to do the radio frequency test and go to a TCB for the certification. In this case, it's even more complex because it's a device with radio and plus it is a medical device. For medical device, you need to get the FDA approval. Okay, it's the federal regulation for medical devices in USA. And it implies testing, it implies safety verifications, a lot of paperwork, and it's a totally different process than I have explained it here, okay? Verification you need to get. And it's long and it is expensive. In US, many companies, depending on the kind of product, what they used to do is to play in the gray lane. And if, for instance, I have a device to measure the pulse, okay, and I do not declare this device as a medical device that can be used in a hospital, I declare this device as a wellness device that used by the person to check their heart rate when it is running and when he is at home, okay? And many companies use the wellness route, which that is not subject to FDA approval, okay? But if you are, for instance, developing an insulin pump, you have to go to FDA. That is not a wellness device, okay? It's the matter where that you can face, or you are developing a glucose meter, okay? This is something that is clear a medical device. Other devices might go under wellness route, which is less restrictive and requires only the typical approval for a radio device. Okay, no FDA approval.
Okay, so first of all, you need to decide whether you're wellness or medical diagnostics, medical device, and in either case, you have to start the process again. Is that correct?
You have to start the process again. European standards and American standards are similar, okay, but you do not have. There is no single market. That is typically, for instance, I don't know, but if you have heard the news recently, there is a lot of noise with the Trans-Pacific Economic Agreement between US and Europe. This is one of the things that is included in this agreement, to align requirements for radio device, align requirements for cars, and the idea is that you can have a single certification to reduce cost, okay? But today, some of them are similar, others not, and you need to do process on both sides.
Okay, so a word of warning for people with American ambition. It's going to have to do it all again. Another question I had here from Javier Ramos from BioB. If using hang on. If using an approved RF module together with full custom microelectronic sensor in a health field, is it mandatory to approve the sensor in an independent way for radio frequency or only for electrical issues?
Let me try to make sure I understand. You have the module in the device, and this device might have different kind of sensors?
Microelectronic sensors.
It's okay, yeah, but
it's bioimpedance. So it's a bioimpedance device that is using an approved RF module. Do they only need to, if you've got the approved RF module, but the rest of the device is electronics, do you have to certify both the RF and the electrics, or if the RF is already approved, you can just approve the electrics?
If the design meets the condition for the module, it's what I was explaining with regard to the antenna gain, the ref exposure conditions, and so on. You only need to test the electronics with EMC and safety.
Excellent. And I think that is the majority of the questions. Just for Leon, so it's full custom microelectronic sensor. Javier's corrected me. I'm not sure what that means.
No, but independently, it is electronic. If it does not have any other radio, you can get the module. You can leverage part of the module certification. Okay?
And just to say to Leon out there, he's asked again, if you integrate several devices with the CE mark, do you need to test the whole system, or do they justify the compliance? And just to reiterate what Raul has been saying is that within Europe, the risk lies with you. So if you're confident that putting together all the CE approved modules makes your whole system approved, it's up to you to decide that.
No, yeah.
No.
Especially, no, it is or not. Let me explain. Especially, there is a rule in EMC that it's the sum of EMC approved devices does not mean an EMC approved device. Okay, because for instance, if I have board number 1 here, 2, I tested board number 1 and the level of radiation is this one. I tested alone board number 2 and the level of radiation is this one. When I put both together, maybe the level is bigger. So it's over, okay? So in terms of systems, if you are using for the radio part, probably you do not need to retest again. But at least for EMC and safety, you will need to test again, okay? If you do not want to test, okay, it's up to you. But it's you are seeing in the declaration with the information you have, and the responsibilities in your side, okay? At least minimum to do some partial tests. It's totally recommended.
Okay, well, if thank you very much, Raul, for that answer. You've got much in the chat channel. There are plenty of people thanking you. Just to let you know. But I think that's it for now. So just on behalf of Startup Scaleup and all our startups, thank you very much for agreeing to do this. And for me, certainly it's been very informative, and I think as well for everyone participating in the chat. So just to say thank you very much and goodbye to the rest of our startups.
Okay, thank you very much to everybody for having here, listening to me. And Brendan, if anyone wants to be in contact, any question, please, no problem from my side. If you want to forward my contact details, okay? I will be happy to support them in this path. It's a long path, but if you get success to place the product in the market, it's a really, really big milestone for everybody, okay?
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again, Raul. You've been very generous with your time. And just to say to everyone goodbye. So that's it.